always been a night person, so I would often find myself bored after my roommate, who was not a night person, went to sleep. To pass the time, I used to go for long walks and spend the time thinking. I spent 4 years like that, walking alone at night, and never once had a reason to feel afraid. I always used to joke with my roommate, and even the drug dealers in the city were polite. But all of that changed in just a few minutes of one evening. It was a Wednesday, somewhere between 1 and 2 in the morning. I was walking near a police-patrolled park, quite away from my apartment. It was quiet, even for a weeknight, with very little traffic, and almost no one on foot. The park, as it was most nights, was completely empty. I turned down a short side street in order to loop back to my apartment when I first noticed him. At the far end of the street on my side was the silhouette of a man dancing. It was a strange dance, similar to a waltz, but he finished each box with an odd forward stride. I guess you could say he was dance-walking, headed straight for me. Deciding he was probably drunk, I stepped as close as I could to the road to give him the majority of the sidewalk to pass by me. The closer he got, the more I realized how gracefully he was moving. He was very tall and lanky, and wearing an old suit. He danced closer still, until I could make out his face. His eyes were open and wide, head tilted back slightly, looking off at the sky. His mouth was formed in a painfully wide cartoon of a smile. Between the eyes and the smile, I decided to cross the street before he danced any closer to me. I took my eyes off him to cross the empty street. As I reached the other side, I glanced back, and then stopped dead in my tracks. He had stopped dancing and was standing with one foot in the street, perfectly parallel to me. He was facing me, but still looking at the sky, smile still wide on his lips. I was completely and utterly unnerved by this. I started walking again, but kept my eyes on the man. He didn't move. Once I had put about half a block between us, I turned away from him for a moment to watch the sidewalk in front of me. The street and sidewalk ahead of me were completely empty. Still unnerved, I looked back to where he had been standing to find him gone. For the briefest of moments, I felt relieved until I noticed him. He had crossed the street and was now slightly crouched down. I couldn't tell for sure due to the distance and the shadows, but I was certain he was facing me. I had looked away from him for no more than 10 seconds, so it was clear that he had moved fast. I was so shocked that I stood there for some time staring at him, and then he started moving again towards me. He took giant, exaggerated, tiptoed steps, as if he were a cartoon character sneaking up on someone, except he was moving very, very quickly. I'd like to say at this point I ran away or pulled out my pepper spray or my cell phone, or anything at all, but I didn't. I just stood there completely frozen as the smiling man crept towards me. And then he stopped again, about a car length away from me, still smiling his smile and still looking at the sky. When I finally found my voice, I blurted out the first thing that came to mind. What I meant to ask was, "What do you want?" in an angry, commanding tone. But what came out instead was a whimpered, "What?" Regardless of whether or not humans can smell fear, they can certainly hear it. was far enough away to almost be out of sight. And then I realized something. He wasn't moving away anymore, nor was he dancing. I watched in horror as the distant shape of him grew larger and larger. He was coming back my way, and this time he was running. I ran as well. I ran until I was off of the side road and back onto a better lit road with sparse traffic. Looking behind me then, he was nowhere to be found. The rest of the way home I kept glancing over my shoulder, always expecting to see his stupid smile, but he was never there. I lived in that city for 6 months after that night, and I never went out for another walk. There was something about his face that always haunted me. He didn't look drunk, and he didn't look high. He looked completely and utterly insane, and that's a very scary thing to see. The next story is called Return to Earth. I think this might be the end, for us anyway. Man and all that we've accomplished. I've had plenty of time to think about it since the last time I saw the sun. The last time I'd ever see it. It's not the end of the world, but it is for us. I guess it started almost a month ago, although it could be longer. There's only the clocks scattered around the house to tell me how long, and half of those are dead now. Anyway, I'm straying from the point. It was on the news. A cruise ship sank for no reason. It wasn't damaged, just pulled straight down. Then the rest of the stories flooded in. Everything in the water was sinking. Oil rigs disappeared. People on the beach pulled down into the abyss. Nobody seemed able to explain why this was happening. Everything in the water was sinking. Nothing floated anymore. It was bizarre. This filled the news for a couple of days, until it just got frightening. It was during one broadcast that it changed for the worse. It was a broadcast from some beach, an on-location report about this strange phenomenon. They were just recycling the same questions we had all been asking for days. Suddenly, panic seemed to grip the face of the reporter. She screamed as the camera quickly tilted down. Her feet were sunk in the sand down to her shin. I remember smirking, thinking it was just some overly sensitive reporter messing up. But then the camera dropped. The remaining 10 or so seconds that followed showed not just the reporter sinking into the sand, but all of them. The whole media circus that had descended on the beach to cover this same story. The reporter who was down to her shin a minute ago was now down to her chest. A shot of writhing, screaming, sinking people ended shortly as the camera was engulfed by the sand. The news stayed on for a few more days, but there was nothing else to say. Some blamed sinkholes for what happened on the beach, while others argued against them from the safety of their downtown studio. The news was a waste of time now. It was much easier to just look out the window. It was more or less a ghost town outside. Everyone was inside, afraid to leave their homes. It didn't seem to make sense. The roads and pavements were being absorbed by grass and dirt. Street signs and traffic lights were being consumed by the plants. Houses too. Some people tried to run, jumping from rooftop to rooftop, looking for higher ground. Occasionally, while flicking through what was left on the TV broadcasts, skyscrapers had become refugee camps. I had made one trip out of the house since it started, across the rooftops, an attempt to get supplies from a nearby supermarket, but that plan seemed to be a waste of time. It was asked by the time I got there, looted and pillaged. There was all the evidence I needed to see how bad this whole thing was. It's easy to be in denial about something like what whatever this was, until it really seems to affect you. When I got back to my house, I noticed something. My car was gone. Well, almost. You could still see the top poking out from the overgrowth and loose soil. And not just my car, all of them. Bigger vehicles were still in sight, only partially obscured, but they were going down too. A few days later, my whole bottom floor was subterranean. I had managed to block the windows and door from bursting in from the dirt and soil, but it was just a cell now, a mausoleum, not somewhere I wanted to be. I spent most of my time by an upstairs window, staring at the hostile world outside. My neighbour died yesterday. He fell off his roof and was swallowed by the earth. He's not the first person to do that either. What made it notable was why he fell. He was trying to stop his dog from getting out. The dog was fine. Well, I assume so. It ran off. They're not affected, the animals. This is our fate. That nihilistic little discovery was too much for me to bear. This whole thing, a living nightmare. I hit the bottle hard and passed out for the night. When I woke up, my head pounded in the darkness. I flicked the light switches and the fuses, but the power was out. I took the flashlight by the fuse box and looked around the house for any supplies. While checking the upstairs, I saw it. The last glimpse of natural light I'll ever see. I had been thinking it was just night, that I had slept all day in an alcohol coma. By the time I could cross the room to the window, it was gone. I was underground. I tried to get out, smashing through plaster and tiles, to be greeted with a stream of soil pouring out from where the sky should be. I don't know how much longer I've got in here. In my house-sized coffin, there's only so much food and so much air. I've got a little bit of light, a couple of candles and a book of matches. The flashlight died some time ago. But this is our fate, man's fate, our return to the earth. The next story is called The Thing in the Window. That thing has been there for almost a week. The figure in the window. It looks featureless, only skin on a human frame, and is pressing itself against the glass somehow. I don't know how it got there, and I don't know how to get rid of it. At first I thought it was a prank, a doll or mannequin that some jerks put there to scare me. But I realized as I walked out of my house to put it away, it wasn't there. I shrugged it off, thinking that someone had hidden it while I was walking through my door. But I went back in and looked out that same window, and it was looking in, staring at me. I walked around my house, yelling for whoever it was to come out, but no one was there. The thing is hairless and naked, and it didn't look like it actually had eyes or even a face at all. But its head is turned towards me when I enter the room. When I sit on my computer, I can feel its faceless hatred pouring into my neck. But when I turn around, it's innocently turned in a different direction. Finally, on Thursday, I tried to open the window, but it's stuck. I think this thing's hands are keeping it down, but I got a good look at its face. Its eyes and mouth are behind the skin, pushing outwards. It stared at me, smiling. Of course I screamed. I pulled back a fist and smashed it onto the glass, determined once and for all to get rid of this glaring monster. I know I'm strong enough. That glass should have cracked, but it didn't. It shuddered under my hand, but it didn't break. And that smile just got wider and wider, until I thought its head would break in half. It raised its own hand was too freaky, knowing that it was watching me. But I couldn't help it. I took a quick glance at the skin-covered face, a small peek. It was angry. That grin was now a gaping frown full of teeth. The skin had ripped away from its mouth, and I could see down its throat. A menacing rumble started to fill the house, and that hairline crack began to spread like splintering ice. I pulled down the duct tape. The rumble stopped. The split skin healed over, and it began to smile again. Now it's night, and the noise hasn't started again. There are no sounds, no rumble, no cracking glass. Everything's quiet now. I can feel its claws gripping the back of my chair. I can hear its skin stretching as it smiles. It's watching me as I type. The next story is called The Guardian Angel. I am always with you. I was there from the time you were born. I stood in the delivery room, staring down at you, before you could even open your eyes to see me. Your parents, relatives, and doctors couldn't see me there, in the corner, watching you with cloudy eyes, but I was there from the time you were born, and I followed you home. I was with you, your constant companion. You played with your toys alone, while I stared from all angles in nearby mirrors, my matted, clotted hair with oily sweat that hung off my dented forehead like glue. I was always your constant companion, drifting behind your mother's car on your ride to preschool. You alone in the bathroom, but I was on the other side of the door, wind whistling through the bruised hole in my throat. My arms twisted and hanging in their sockets as I stood hunched on the other side of the shower curtain. I wait and I follow you. I follow and drift behind you. I'm not seen. I'm almost not there in light. You never saw me that morning as I sat across from you at the breakfast table. A shiny red clot hanging from an empty tooth socket as I gaped grotesquely at you. I wonder sometimes if you know I'm there. I think you are aware, but you'll never understand just how close I am. I spend hours of your day doing nothing more than breathing in your ear. Breathing, gagging really. I crave to be close to you, to always wrap my crippled arms around your neck. I lie near you every single night, cloudy eyes staring at your ceiling, underneath your bed, at your sleeping face in the dark. Yes, you caught me staring occasionally. Your parents came running down to your room one night when you screamed. You were just beginning to talk, so you were only able to cry out, "Man in my room." You thought you'd never forget the sight of me, with my collapsed jaw hanging to my chest, swinging back and forth. I sank back into your closet, and your mother was unable to see me, though you pointed and pointed. You thought you'd never forget when they left that same night. You saw the closet door crack so softly, and me crawling across the floor to your bed on all fours, shambling in jerking movements as I pushed myself under your bed in disjointed limbs. You learned a new word for me, boogeyman. Not quite the monster you thought I was. I'm just waiting and following you always, touching your face and with my knotted fingers as you sleep. You'll see me again soon. Any day now I'm coming, blunt and brutal. One day you'll walk across the road, and I believe I'll plow into you with a loud roar and a screech. You rolling on the pavement, rolling under wheels, blunt force, metal fenders, and my fingers touching your face again and again, as you stare up from the cold pavement with cloudy eyes, your matted, clotted hair hanging else will see me. You will stare past them into my eyes, and I'll leer down at you. For the first time in our life, something like a smile will come over my face. You'll swear you're looking into a mirror, as clotted red bubbles come from our mouths. I'll lean down past the doctors and the ogling people and pick you up in my crooked arms. Our faces will touch, my wings will unfurl, and then you'll have to follow me, and I am always with you. I am your guardian angel. The next story is called The Basement. I was home alone for the week, as my family had gone on vacation while I had to stay and work. It was around 2 a.m. and I'd stayed up to watch a scary movie in the dark in my basement. I was intent on really scaring myself and seeing how far into terror I could really go, while still knowing I was safe in my own home. It was then that I heard pounding footsteps on the first floor. This was a common and annoying occurrence when my family was home. Every time they passed through the front hallway, past the basement door, I heard their footsteps. This time, fear immediately shot through me at the sound. My reflex was to turn the television off immediately. The basement door was up a flight of steps and around a corner, so whoever it was would not have seen any light. I heard the basement door handle click and turn as I sat in absolute darkness. I moved slowly so as to be absolutely silent and crawled behind our large television. As I passed it inch by inch, I noted with panic that its blank screen still dimly glowed. I heard footsteps coming down the carpeted but creaky stairs. I froze in my hiding place, listening. For many long minutes, I heard nothing. Had the intruder seen the television's afterglow, or had it faded in time? Was he standing in the pitch dark, listening to me? I seemed to lie there in total silence for an interminably long time. My panic began to fade, and I began to think more clearly. Had I really heard an intruder? Could someone possibly be standing there in silence for so long, without making any noise? The basement was so exceedingly quiet that the silence itself began to hurt my ears. Could the unknown person really avoid any noise from shuffling, or breathing, or anything else? If there was an intruder, he was still in the basement, because the creaky stairs were incredibly loud. The door handle clicked, and he wouldn't know to mask his footsteps on the first floor, so that they couldn't be heard down here. I began counting in my head, trying to pass the time, as drool fell from my mouth onto the carpet. I didn't dare risk the sound of swallowing. I reached 60 seconds once, twice, 30 times, then 60 times. By now my fear had faded, and I was more confused than anything. I estimated I'd been crouched in the absolute black for almost 2 hours, and had still heard nothing. If there was an intruder, none of this made sense. Finally I decided I'd have to make a move. If I did nothing, eventually the sun would come up and shine in through the small basement windows, and worse, I began to smell something horrible and cloying. Slowly, ever so slowly, I began to inch my way towards the stairs by way of the walls. If someone was standing there in the dark, I should be able to go around them and then make a break up the stairs. Meanwhile, this horrible odor grew stronger. Had something died down here in the night? No living person would smell like that. Terrible images of some sort of corpse monster listening for me in the dark erupted in my thoughts, and I moved as fast as I could without making a sound. Just as I finally approached the stairs, there was an enormous clatter, as if something falling or collapsing on the floor, was falling that last prompted me to bolt up the stairs and out of the house. I asked the police and they confirmed the back door of my house had been left open as well, near a single bare footprint in the mud. Somehow, for some reason I'll never know, there was someone else in the basement with us, silent, waiting, and listening in the dark over the fresh corpse of an old